I thought I'm probably long overdue to do an update on container metaphors. There's a few things I'm aware of now that I wasn't aware of when I did the original videos. Now, on the container metaphors section, one of the things I said was that container metaphors are a lifelong issue. And one of the things I raised was, how does a person get into the container in the first place? And I said they were either born into it, they were put in it, it was their place. There's a few nuances around this that I thought it's worth mentioning. Container metaphors aren't lifelong issues. I know I said that. It's not the case. I've done enough now interviews with people with container metaphors that there's a number of patterns that become very obvious. Container metaphors will emerge when somebody has a long-term issue, and particularly the problem started sometime during their childhood, or it's an issue from childhood. So it's not a lifelong issue, it's for the duration of the adult life. Now, childhood can be measured differently by different people. So some people will say, my childhood ended when I was 10. They may have been an event or something, or circumstances around them changed. Some people have a normal duration of childhood, so round about up until 16, 18 years old, they start to become a grown-up, become an adult. And I certainly know of a number of people who are in their early 20s who are still living the role of a child. They still live with mum and dad do everything for them, and they're still, effectively still behave like a child, even though they're in their early 20s. So childhood's quite fluid in terms of its duration, so it's going to be different for different people. Container metaphors are things that start in the childhood period of time. Now, another thing that I said was that you can find some people will tell you the container, I fell into a trap, I was dropped in it yesterday or last week. Say a work issue. So one of the things I said was there was potentially something where it's not going to be the lifelong issue that I was claiming it to be. I now know that's not correct. So if the person says, how long have you been in the pit of despair? I've been there since yesterday. If you ask them, do you ever have that experience prior to yesterday? Initially they'll deny it. Most of the time they go, oh no, it's yesterday was the first time ever. If you persist and go, okay, was there ever a time when the experience of what this is like for you, you've had this experience preceding the events of yesterday? They'll say yes. What we find is for them, the container is a recurring schema, it's a recurring theme in their lives. They will have had that experience since sometime in their childhood. May not have been consistently. It might not be my entire life has been in the pit of despair since I was 5. It might well be that periodically they find themselves in exactly the same situation all over again. Hence, it's a schema. It's a recurring pattern. So what they're able to do in between times is distract themselves. And container metaphors tend to lend themselves very, very well to distraction behaviors, whether it's alcohol and drugs, promiscuity, gambling, denial, in varying forms, where people engage in behaviors that serve to distract the fact that they're there. Periodically, those behaviors fail and they become aware again of where they are. So the guy who felt he was dropped in it yesterday, he's been there a lot longer than that. It's just that yesterday his coping strategy of distracting himself from it, it didn't work anymore. It suddenly became aware of it. And he might say, well, yeah, it's because this person dropped me in it. No, they became aware of it yesterday. They were able to be not aware of it prior to that, because all of those events that conspired to that thing that happened yesterday had already happened. It's just that the person wasn't aware of it. So here's one of the patterns. Container metaphors and distraction behaviors go hand in hand with each other. And they may not have been the entire life, but certainly for the duration of adulthood. So that was one thing I wanted to clear up. Now, the other thing is self as containers. I got this one a bit wrong. So here's the update on self as containers. There's lots of the elements in the video that are actually quite correct. But self as containers, this is actually fulfillment. This is about emotional fulfillment, which is one of the things that I said. And it's about what I give to other people, what I get from other people. the pattern that started to emerge in the questions where I asked people who had fulfillment metaphors, how long have you had this for? Typically, these are the things that start during the teenage years. So it's not quite adulthood, it's not adolescence so much, it's not early adulthood, it's that kind of cusp in between. It's the emotional transactions that people learn to do from peer groups. So this is usually stuff that is independent of family. Container metaphors are nearly always family. I say nearly always family. The fulfillments, self as container, are more about peer groups. Now, as somebody who works as a therapist, when I have parents ask me or bring me a teenager who's errant, so they're engaging in drugs, they're hanging out with the wrong crowd, they're engaging in criminal behaviors, that kind of stuff, the parents often think, what have we done wrong? Where did we go wrong that our lovely offspring became this monster that he is today? The chances are actually the parents didn't do very much wrong at all. If we put them under a microscope, we can find tons of things they've done wrong, but this is probably not the causation of what's going on. What we know is that peer groups, other teenagers, have a far bigger influence on the brain of another teenager than the parents will ever be capable of doing. Here is the unfortunate reality. If your kid's hanging out with the wrong crowds, doing the drugs, move. You need to basically remove the child from that peer group. And you need to move as far as you possibly can. That usually gives the best outcome, but it's the most inconvenient way of doing it. What I am aware of is all those legal interventions and group work and therapists and social workers tend not to be that successful. They tend to be more prohibitive in terms of how they operate. Now, fulfillments are what I give other people, what I get from other people. Now, some people learn erroneously what they're supposed to get from others, and some people learn erroneously what they're supposed to give others. And I certainly know in the Lord of the Flies mentality, certain naive young groups that operate as a peer group, what they start to do is they take on values that don't work anywhere else in the world. They only work within that particular group. So what people learn to do in terms of emotional trading inside that group renders them effectively dysfunctional somewhere else in their lives, often with friends, family, employers, normal civilian life. So we can get the emotional fulfillments thing completely wrong. Here's other stuff that can happen. I can be looking for something from other people that no one else on the planet can possibly provide. Now, what we tend to find here is that if I'm looking for something to be fulfilled in me from other people that can never be fulfilled because no one else gives it, the chances are I'm on this borderline carrying an object. So this is a carried object metaphor that is often operating as a container to be fulfilled. We've got three taxonomies in one in terms of metaphor structure. In that case, what I'll be looking for is what's it like, the thing that's empty inside you that you want to fulfill. What is it like? And often we'll find it's a container of some description. So in which case I'm going to use it's a carried object of some description that operates as a container. So I'm going to use the burdens protocol and ask them, where are you taking it to? And I'm going to put them under stress. Where are you taking it to? Where are you going with this? And just see, we'll just track it through into its future pacing. And that tends to work quite well. But some people will be looking for stuff from other people, but they don't know how to recognize it when it's offered. So you can find somebody who feels unloved or unliked by people. Not necessarily disliked, but they just don't feel that anyone actually likes them. And yet they're surrounded by people who do like them and do love them. The problem they've got is that they don't know how to recognize either what's being offered or how to receive what's being offered. So they're blind to what's being offered to them. Or what's being offered to them isn't what they want. So it doesn't match. There's a mismatch. Now, one of the things I did recently in a workshop was I got everyone to think about their own particular fulfillments. So what is it that you offer up to other people? What have you got a lot of to give? And what is it that you're looking for from others? And what we then did is we went around the group to pull out everyone's metaphors. To give a simple example, One person had this, she was like a fountain, and this lovely, warm, clear fluid was just pouring out of her. She was a lovely person. She had so much to give, and it was this never-ending, she was a fountain of all sorts of loveliness. Somebody else was looking to be fulfilled, and what it was like for this person was carrying around a great big bucket. It was empty. The bucket was empty. I did note afterwards it had a few holes in it in the metaphor, but the bucket was empty, and this person was looking for a fulfillment from their holy bucket. There's a bit of a match between these two. Somebody has something to offer that somebody else is able to receive and recognize the receipt of. Somebody else, though, their fulfillment, what they were looking for, oddly, it was like a big rock, and it was a solid rock, and they were looking for someone else to take it from them. Obviously, they're not going to drop it or put it down. They want someone else to carry it. So their fulfillment would be, it's not really a fulfillment, but that's what they were calling it. I've got a rock, and I want you to take it from me. We can see the mismatch between the person who's got a lot of this metaphorical fountain water to give, and somebody who's got a rock they're expecting someone else to take. We can see how it mismatches. So what we started to look at was how much is it possible to find the commonalities between people in terms of their emotional trading. I have stuff to offer, I'm looking for stuff back. I have stuff to offer that you don't want, but you have stuff that I can receive and I want. Meanwhile, I can offer you stuff that you want and you've got stuff that I want. So we've got all these different ways that people can relate. Some relationships emotionally are entirely one way. Some are two ways. Some are, I can give you one thing, you don't return that, you return something entirely different. But what you have to give that I don't want, you give to somebody else. So we have these, it's emotional trading. It's emotions as transactions. And this again goes back to the peer group thing as teenagers. We learn to emotionally trade. And most of us had quite complex emotional trades going on between us and our friends in that kind of 16 to 24 age bracket. I know it wasn't just me, because I was a nursing student and I lived in a hospital accommodation. It was a bloody madhouse, I tell you, because we had this kind of weird naivety and we're all trying to work out emotionally how it all works. And of course the emotions are so intense and they're so overwhelming, and the slightest thing can, I'm glad it's over, let's put it that way. What we tend to find with the fulfillment is that where there are problems, often they operated very, very well inside that peer group. So inside the teenage times, these were things that were required. Now the person's an adult and moved on, they're not getting reciprocation and fulfillment because other people are realigning how they do stuff. But this thing in them hasn't updated effectively to the modern times and to other people. So these are the things you tend to find. The other thing that's interesting about the fulfillment is the intensity of them. They tend to be those emotions that are too much. Time kind of really distorts around fulfillment emotions. If I've got an emptiness inside, I'm feeling empty and hollow, and I've got this yearning, whenever I'm experiencing that, time can really change. Very different though, if I'm brimming over with stuff, and I've got so much to give. Again, time changes in a different way. So the time relationships with fulfillments are also worth paying attention to. So that's what we've got so far. There's a lot more to this. I will be very interested to hear other people's views on this. I'm still gathering data around the emotional trading. I'm also looking at value. How do people value these emotional transactions? For some people, an emotion has a far higher value than other emotions. And people differ in the value they give to emotions. Anyway, that's for another day. So comments in the section below. I'd love to hear your feedback, and I will see you soon.